Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp Inc., MGI on the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected high-grade gold, including 16.9 meters of 13.58 grams and 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program is planned to further evaluate previously identified subsurface high-grade gold mineralization. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims. She's the BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome to the show, Kris.
Thank you very much for having me on.
This huge battle between BC and Alberta over the Kinder Morgan pipeline from Edmonton to Burnaby. My question is, I know the company has spent tens of millions, but what kind of taxpayer money is being spent here on all these lawyers fighting this out in court?
So that's a great question, and it's something that we'll eventually find out once all of the smoke clears as far as the court goes. But what was really alarming that we saw out of Alberta the other day is that while BC is trying to stymie this pipeline, the Kinder Morgan expansion of their pipeline, now the Alberta government is saying that they're going to become investors, quote unquote, in this project. And of course, government doesn't have its own money. Every nickel of that is taxpayer money. And there's always major red flags whenever a government says, hey, we're going to use taxpayers' money to fight this or do this or invest in this. It doesn't matter if it's as vital and important as oil and gas or as frivolous as we see some of these Bombardier contracts back east. That's always going to be a problem, and so now this is doubly concerning. Number one, our supporters at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation overwhelmingly support the responsible expansion of the Kinder Morgan pipeline. They see oil and gas as the lifeblood of our economy, which it is here in North America and in Canada. But now we see the Alberta government saying, hey, we're going to throw taxpayers' money into this pit fight too. And so we're doubly concerned now from both sides of it.
Well, this was supposed to be about $7 billion in private investment, and that's fine because they can always write off things. Governments can't write off expenses.
No, they can't. All they can do is take our money in taxes and then throw it at a project. And that will only ever get more expensive. And the question is where does it end? Does this end after the drop-dead date and they decide to kill the pipeline? Does this end after a bit longer of a battle when they decide to actually expand the pipeline? Do we ever see any of that money back? Quite often you'll see both federal and provincial governments make these big grand announcements of loans, quote-unquote, that they're giving to different companies and enterprises. But most of those loans are never paid back. Like, it's just an enormous expenditure on behalf of taxpayers, and we don't get a say in it. So it's very, very concerning.
Do you think if they're going to sink billions into a project like this, it should go to referendum?
That's a really good question. We're usually in favor of referenda, especially if you can twin a referendum with an election. So that, say, for example, in Metro Vancouver, they're coming up with municipal elections later on this fall. If you can add a referendum question onto those elections, the expense is minimal, very, very minimal. And so the taxpayers aren't footing an extra bill. But yeah, with these sort of big projects, we usually like to hear from voters and we usually like to hear from taxpayers. So having a referendum on it might be a good idea. Not sure if it really fits right now with Kinder Morgan, considering that the federal government has already ruled on this repeatedly. They've already given this thing the green light repeatedly, and they've really, really studied this thing. So I don't know at this point if a referendum is really the answer with Kinder Morgan. It sounds, frankly, like this is just something the feds are going to have to move on.
Well, also, too, I'm wondering, with the federal government, Trudeau keeps saying, well, we want the pipeline, but they've also not really done much to push it through.
No, they haven't. And so, you know, these are sorts of negotiations that you're supposed to be having around the table. So, for example, when we saw a couple of weeks ago this huge announcement of $7 billion, with a B, dollars going into Metro Vancouver's transit system that they've been working on now for years, a big chunk of that is federal funding. And so why don't they have their lead ministers on those files sitting down in Vancouver or having teleconference calls saying, guys, you want your transit funding, which is a major part of your province, pony up, allow for this pipeline, which has been federally approved and investigated, to go through. These are the sorts of adult conversations that governments always have to have with each other. But lo and behold, about a week or so later, they've turned around and said that they're going to keep fighting this pipeline. So this is where we see a lot of dysfunction between levels of government.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after the break.
MGX Minerals is revolutionizing the new energy economy with patented lithium extraction technology, replacing traditional solar evaporation using low-cost, low-energy nanofiltration. The first system of this paradigm shift technology is currently being commissioned. MGX Minerals trades on the CSE, symbol XMG, the OTCQB, symbol MGXMF, and Frankfurt, symbol 1MG. For more information, visit our website, mgxminerals.com.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test numerous targets located by recent groundwork is planned for early 2018. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, the lower mainland politicians who voted themselves a nice pension increase and a huge salary hike may be backing down on it, but do you see them doing that in the long run?
Well, I'm glad that they're thinking of backing down on it, and we will be at that meeting where they decide whether or not they're going to back down on it. And yeah, in the long run, this all gets back down to accountability. We need to have a municipal affairs, a financial auditor in place. They need to be overseeing these expenses the same way that they do at the federal level. These sort of expenses need to be posted online when it comes to things like trips and hospitality and whatnot. But I really need to stress, at the Metro Vancouver board level, for listeners, this is a panel. This is a regional district overarching panel of politicians who are already paid their regular salaries, being city councillors or mayors of their respective cities. So it doesn't matter if you're from Port Coquitlam or Surrey or downtown Vancouver, you could be a city councillor or a mayor, you're paid to do that job. You also get to sit, in some cases, on the Metro Vancouver panel, and you are paid a lot of dough to sit on those meetings. So if you're at a meeting that's under 4 hours long, you're getting paid close to $400 just for that one meeting. If your meeting at Metro Vancouver's board goes more than 4 hours, you're paid close to $800 just for attending that meeting. And it was from this extra bonus board that these sitting and paid politicians voted themselves a leaving bonus. This is not something where they've sat on a major corporate board for years or a not-for-profit group for years and given their blood, sweat, and tears, and they're never being compensated. This is a bonus board they're sitting on that they voted themselves a leaving bonus from, all with your money. Every nickel of it is taxpayers' money coming from Metro Vancouver. And for people living in Metro Vancouver, a lot of them can't make ends meet. A lot of them actually go into personal debt just to pay for their basic expenses. And then they turn around and see politicians acting like this. It's rightly caused the ire of the West Vancouver Mayor, Michael Smith, who's calling for an end to this.
Well, I wasn't aware that they were paid that much to attend those board meetings.
Yeah, they are. Every single meeting. So Metro Vancouver Board, doesn't matter if you're the chair, the vice chair, or the person sitting there as a council person, just a member of the board, they call themselves directors. Yeah, you're paid that. And the chair of the board, whoever gets to be the chair, gets paid more than $70,000 a year for being the chair. The vice chair gets paid more than $30,000 per year for being the vice chair of this one board. That is in addition to their regular salary that they were elected for.
And do they get this hourly rate on top of that?
I'm not sure if the chair and vice chair do. That's a really good question.
If they wanted a pension fund, why don't they just take these outrageous hourly fees and put them into an RRSP?
That's a great question. They're already making a ton of money on top of what they're already elected to do. So you think that they'd be able to make wise investments themselves, or just keeping it in a savings account or under their mattress? That's frankly none of our business. Their retirement plans are up to them. And we have to keep in mind that many of these politicians, these council people and these mayors, are getting really shiny resumes out of this deal. And they're getting major contacts. They're really networking very well with these great jobs. And once they leave these elected roles, they're usually not hurting to find another job, to find another career. And also this idea that somehow you should get a pension for sitting not as just an elected councillor, but sitting on a secondary board? Who deserves a pension from that? Especially bankrolled by taxpayers. It's almost laughable if it weren't so exorbitant.
Well, who elected these people to this position where they can pay or vote on their own pay raises?
That's a great question. So, of course, the local area people, whoever vote in the municipal elections, will vote for somebody to become a city council person or a mayor. And then the Metro Vancouver board, I'm not sure if they're appointed directly by a secondary board that we probably already pay for as well on top of that, or if they simply, quote-unquote, volunteer their time. I imagine it's a combination of both. They're probably asked to be on the board, and then they agree to be on the board, and then they're paid very, very well to be on the board. And then again, just think of it, on top of what they're paid, they voted themselves a $15,000 on average leaving bonus, and a pay raise, a retroactive pay raise.
Well, again, if you want a pension fund, why don't you start paying money into it?
That's
Are
the
they
thing.
going to be paying money into it?
If this stays the way it is, I think they will start paying money into it, but I don't think it can stand. The public outcry and the backlash against this was vehement, and rightly so. Rightly so. And so I think at their next Vancouver Metro Board meeting, they're going to take a look at it and they're going to scrap it, because I think they realize once the sunshine shone on them that they can't get away with this and that it's way too much. I think for average people who are working every day in the Metro Vancouver area, who again are paying some of the highest costs of living in the entire continent, it was just too much to swallow. And now we're seeing at Metro Vancouver this pie in the sky, beautiful glittering tower that they're working in Burnaby. And not only do they have really exclusive real estate, but they have an exclusive cafeteria that only they get to use, and they get very deeply discounted rates on their food. The average public is not allowed in there, and they actually get they have a massage clinic that is exclusive to them on these same floors, and they pay $10 for a 40-minute long massage. If you take a look at the report on this, it's just mind-boggling.
Oh, so now we have taxpayer-funded massages for these people.
Yes. So what's happened is they've allowed students who are working on their practicums in, massage therapy, which is completely legit, but they've allowed them into the Metro Vancouver halls of power, and they give massages to bureaucrats working at Metro Vancouver at a crazily discounted rate. So, $10 for a 40-minute long massage. For most people who would ever be able to afford a massage to begin with, that's closing in on $100 if you go to a private clinic. But here, these bureaucrats are getting it for $10. Just imagine the person that's sitting at a cashier, right? If you're a cashier, you're on your feet all day, you're scanning groceries, or you're working at a hardware store or something, or if you're a bus driver, you've got a bad back, and turn around and take a look at these bureaucrats working in this tower for Metro Vancouver, getting massages at work. Really?
Well, let's get jobs there.
Right? And see, this is the thing, is once you amp this up to the point where you have such a huge divide between the people who are paid by taxpayers, the public, the bureaucrats, the public sector workers, when you have a huge gap between them and those of us who simply pay and work in private sector, you really come down and get a lot of fractiousness going on, and you really have a huge chasm and a big divide, and you wind up with people saying, hey, to their kids, just make sure you get a job in government. Don't start a small business. Don't be an entrepreneur. Don't become a tradesperson. Don't, do long haul trucking. Don't do what you want to do. Just find your way to get into that tower. But at the end of the day, we only have taxpayers' money. There isn't an endless pot supply of it. Somebody needs to feed this bureaucracy. And in order to keep it healthy, it has to stay lean and frugal. And we're certainly not seeing any frugality going on at Metro Vancouver.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Vatic Ventures Corp. is a potash exploration company focused on the Korat Basin in Thailand, the world's largest undeveloped potash resource. Vatic's management has extensive potash exploration and development experience in Thailand. Vatic will have marketing advantage compared to Western producers. Drill program commences this spring. Vatic trades on the TSX Venture, symbol VCV, and on Frankfurt, symbol V8V2. Visit our website, vaticventures.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, is there any one area where you feel British Columbians are being gouged more than they should be when it comes to tax time?
So that's a great question. So at the Taxpayers Federation, we get calls every day. It's really amazing sometimes to see the amount of waste. So as far as taxes go, the main one that I've been focusing on, apart from everything else here in BC, is the carbon tax. And I think a lot of people thought that somehow this thing was going to, keep the environment clean, but magically not cost us anything. We all were told this is going to be revenue neutral. But what's been really eye-opening is, number one, the government has dropped the term revenue neutral altogether. That's gone. They're now calling it a tool. But if you take a look at that, even when it was called revenue neutral, what that meant was really eye-opening. So what it is say the government takes in, for argument's sake, $1 billion in carbon tax, okay, in one fiscal year. What they did is they would take that $1 billion, put it in the budget document, name it revenue neutral carbon tax, and stick it in a frame. Then they took about 17 or so sundry tax credits, everything from children's fitness tax credit to the film incentive tax credit to a tax credit on renovating seniors' homes or for people up north, and they scraped them together and stuffed them inside the carbon tax frame, made it balance out to zero. Voila! Revenue neutral. That's literally what it meant. When I went up and spoke with one of the finance department officials, been there for a long time, I thought I was misreading it because I'd lived away from BC for a while. I traveled all over Canada and worked there. Now I've come back home and I said, am I misreading this? And he said, no. This has always just been an accounting exercise. So what this means is BC, British Columbians, pay a carbon tax. That is uncommon. But the government, up until now, stuffed very common tax credits inside of it to make it appear revenue neutral. That's all this was. All this has ever been is just a big tax grab. But they're calling it a carbon tax as a way of making you look away, as was a way of making you think that, it's for the good of the environment. It's not. It's just a tax that they've stuck a label on.
Well, have they said this carbon tax is going to improve transit for people, so they have an alternative to using their private vehicle?
See, this is the thing, though, is that every single budget, every province, federally, you name it, municipally, all of them include transit spending. All of them include tax credits for things like children's fitness programs and whatnot. All of them include tax credits for all those sorts of things. And all that BC gets to do up until now is say, we're using this bucket labeled carbon tax for that stuff. But the point is they're still filling the bucket with your money. And now, federally, they're trying to do the same thing. Federally, they're trying to impose a carbon tax on the entire country. And if you take a look, for example, Saskatchewan farmers were able to reduce their emissions and improve their technology and efficiency without a carbon tax. And even though they were able to do that and they reduced their CO2 emissions, the feds are still going to impose a tax upon them. And the question always is, if this isn't reducing CO2 and it's not stopping global warming, what's the carbon tax for? And the answer, of course, is just that it's a tax. It's just the government gets to pull money in through that hose.
What's kind of ironic about this as well is that Canada is the coldest nation on earth. We have, such a great wealth of oil and gas, so we're the only country in the world, too, that doesn't give a break to its own citizens, on oil and gas if you possess a lot of it. But what I read was a report that said the one country that will benefit the most from global warming is Canada, because it'll reduce the ice cap and it will uncover all these unfounded resources.
And just imagine, though, we'll probably never be allowed to use those resources. Look at what we're dealing with right now. With Kinder Morgan, that's been functioning a pipeline well since the 1950s, and they want to expand it. Look at this fight that we're getting. Even the Trudeau government, which is not super friendly towards oil and gas, the Trudeau government has approved this thing, and we're still getting this. I think for a lot of people, they aren't able to stop and realize just how vital oil and gas are to our modern civilization. If they want to imagine a world, I actually hear people say, keep it in the ground. Let's stop using fossil fuels. Like, if you want to do that, look back to 1850. That's what it was like before we had oil and gas. And now, take away all of the skills that the people had at that time to deal without oil and gas. So, forget it. No horses and carts, no blacksmiths, all that other stuff that they actually used to make their society function. Where would we be? Every single level of what we do relies on oil and gas. From tilling the soil, to planting our food, to harvesting our food, to growing our food in greenhouses, to trucking it to market, to all of us going to the grocery store. Even if you take transit to go to the grocery store, you are still using oil and gas on that bus. And the manufacturing of that bus only happened because of oil and gas. And overnight here in BC, a lot of jurisdictions get their power overnight from Alberta, which uses coal, which is a natural resource. I think for a lot of us, British Columbia is just so breathtakingly beautiful, and much of the time, much of the year, it's so mild and warm that it's easy for a lot of us to forget how vital oil and gas are to every single aspect of our lives. And if Canadians can take oil and gas from the ground in a very careful and responsible manner and be the best at the world at doing it, why aren't we helping that? Why are we fighting it so much?
If people say, let's go back to the old days, well, before we had petroleum to help heat and light our homes, we were using whale oil.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, so are we supposed to do that again?
And that's a good question. And then you actually, even if you don't want to go back in time, which would be really scary, because that was before we were able to treat our water so that it was safe. That was before we were able to treat our human waste en masse to make sure that it was safe. All of those things, again, are capable of doing it because of oil and gas and because of power plants. Let's look in the modern day and look around the world. With I think it's more than 1 billion people on Earth don't even have electricity. And I think 1 billion more or so, electricity is so expensive and oil and gas are so scarce that they use dung, animal dung, and twigs to stay warm. That is not sanitary, that is not healthy, and in many of those places their air quality is terrible. So why are we fighting our natural resource sector when we look around the world and other people are living much worse? I'm sure we can do this in a very responsible manner, and we have been doing so. And so I really think that a lot of education needs to happen here. And that's not even touching the economy, the billions of dollars that this industry gives into our economy. For working families to be able to send one of their family members or both to the oil patch or up north to the gas fields and actually earn a decent living, to actually make more than $90,000 or $100,000, for a lot of people, that's out of reach nowadays. For a lot of people, that is just pie in the sky. But for people in trades or people in trucking to actually be able to pick up their work boots and go make some money for their family, that's the difference between owning a house and not. Or putting your kid in hockey or singing lessons or not. And I think sometimes those of us who live in downtown urban centers forget about that.
Kris, how can people get a hold of the Taxpayers Federation?
Thank you very much for that. They can go to our website, taxpayer.com, and you can go back and look through a whole bunch of articles dating back many years, actually. And if you go to our Facebook page and like us on Facebook, We're always having a really lively conversation there. I try to post a couple of videos every single month and try to really get people engaged there. And the main message is, no matter who you vote for, this is your money. All of it is your money. Government doesn't make its own money. It takes it from you. And it is your responsibility and your right to stand up and be heard. And I want to remind people, sometimes it can get really frustrating and frankly depressing. You just think that, oh, well, there's nothing I can do. When you phone a politician, which works for you, you have a right to call them. When you phone them and email them, their staff pay attention. For every call and email, they always assume that 100 other people feel the way you do. So when you phone them and you write them and you let your voice be heard, that does get through, because eventually they need to pay the piper. They need to face you in an election, and they will change their tune.
Well, it seems the only time they listen to you is election time.
Right? Gosh, maybe we should have one every 6 months, but that would be too expensive, right?
Well, with blockchain, you should be able to vote from your house any day of the week.
Right? Imagine just having it would be almost like watching American Idol or something, right? You just have your indicator, your approval indicator going up and down.
Kris, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you very much for covering these very important topics.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, their website, taxpayer.com. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. If you have any questions for guests like Kris, you can send them to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.